We would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land on which the university stands. We respectfully recognise elders past, present and future. Welcome to Newsline.
Brought to you live from the Media Precinct at RMIT University. Good afternoon and welcome to Newsline. I'm Ada Hall.
And I'm Amy Ross. Today on the program, we'll be looking at the release of refugees, inmate voting, coastal erosion, horses in the CBD, the effect of minor parties in the election, squalene and cosmetics, and yummy treats.
We'll also have updates across sports, international affairs and weather. But first, to today's headlines. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is expected to announce his ministry today or tomorrow as Labor reaches enough seats for a majority government. In breaking news, the party has claimed to have won the seat of Gilmore, taking the share of the parliament to 77 seats. Labor held its first caucus meeting earlier today in Canberra to discuss who will form the ministry. On Wednesday, the new committee members will be sworn in. Also, independent Warragah MP Zali Steggall has urged the Albanese government to nominate a female speaker in the House of Representatives to reflect the female voters.
Today, the state government announced that flu vaccinations will be free for people over the age of 6 months. The program, involving GPs and pharmacists, will begin on the 1st of June as a response to the unusually early start to the 2022 influenza season. More than 15,000 cases of the flu have been detected in Victoria this year, with cases increasing by more than 30% in the past week. Previously, the flu jab has only been free for certain high-risk groups, but will now be accessible for most people.
The New South Wales government will soon be offering women undergoing IVF a cash rebate of up to $2,000 to help alleviate the high costs of fertility treatment. The rebate is the first of its kind in Australia and is part of an $80 million package from the state government. The New South Wales government says about 12,000 IVF patients who are currently using private fertility clinics will benefit from the rebate, and another 6,180 women will be given access to publicly supported IVF treatment. The rebate will be open from January 1st, 2023, with those who have undergone treatment from October 1st, 2022 able to submit a claim.
The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade have said there is an unprecedented demand for its passport services. The APO has told consumers to allow 6 weeks to renew their passports and that new applications could take longer. This financial year, more than 1.1 million passports have been issued following the reopening of Australia's international borders. There have been calls across the country for the APO to better their communication, with many waiting hours at passport offices across the nation in search of receiving information on their application.
Melbourne's Crown Casino has been fined $80 million over its illegal practice that allowed a transfer of funds from China. A Victorian Royal Commission into the Crown discovered foreign punters using a Chinese Union Pay card to gamble at the casino between 2012 and 2016. The Victorian Gambling and Casino Commission found that the Crown revenued $32 million from the scandal, violating Chinese and Victorian laws. The VGCCC chairperson, Fran Thorne, said that while the Crown was complying with the disciplinary process, they would still be stripped of the gained revenue.
A few weeks before the federal election, the Department of Homes and Affairs released the last of the refugees held at the Park Hotel on Swanston Street. Reporter Jacqueline Stanley took a closer look.
It's late on a cool Melbourne Friday in August last year, and this man, Iraqi refugee Basim Al-Abidi, has been suddenly released from the Park Hotel after a crippling 611 days. On December 18 of 2019, he was brought to Australia by the Immigration Department for emergency surgery.
Yeah, I came for the surgery 2019, then I done the surgery 2020, then I got released 2021. And I am 39 years old. I spent 9 years in this limbo. And I don't know where I am going. I don't know what's my future.
Professor Louise Newman is a psychiatrist, clinical researcher and refugee advocate. At her clinic in Albert Park, she spoke of the compounded trauma experienced by those in the former government's alternative places of detention, like the Park Hotel.
We can all deal with, these sort of things in the short term, but we're talking long-term, deep trauma for people who are desperately wanting to be hopeful that something could change.
But on August 27 last year, something did change for Basim.
They say, you going to release now, and then they say, pick up your stuff, you have less than 1 hour. And I just sitting on my bed and I don't know really what to do. Like, I know I have to leave, but I didn't do anything. Then I start crying that time. It wasn't easy. It's just suddenly they say you're going to release. Yeah.
I asked Professor Newman what the sudden release from hotel detention would be like.
We put pressure on them to suddenly be happy. It's not necessarily a sense of sudden release and freedom. It's a very mixed emotional response.
I start to enjoy and like we walk around the park, or sometimes when they cut the grass, those things I was already completely forget about it.
While Basim is relatively more free than he was in the hotel, he hasn't been granted a visa and is in community detention. This means that the immigration minister, whoever they are in the new government, can revoke his status at any moment.
I feel now, and I hope I am right, that I will have this freedom forever, but I still sometimes worry.
Jacqueline Stanley, Newsline.
While most Australians voted in this year's federal election, some weren't given the opportunity. People in South Australian prisons who were eligible to vote were not able to. Our reporter, Rebecca Broadhead, has the story.
Before the federal election, not-for-profit Justice Action's newspaper Just Us was distributed to all Australian prisons with voting information and party policies. South Australian authorities initially banned it, but after contact details to NGOs were redacted, the ban was removed. South Australia Correctional Services Department said the newspaper would facilitate relationships between prisoners and non-prisoners, contrary to regulations. The department also said the paper contained proactive and inflammatory material, such as a Greens Party statement that the legal system is often racist.
Now, that's ridiculous because people have to live in a racist structure, and they don't have to be told by a newspaper that it's racist when you have 14 times the rate of imprisonment for Aboriginal people.
Such attempts to bar access to voting information are made worse by ineffective communications between prisons and electoral commissions.
We spent a few months before the election ensuring that every jurisdiction, every commissioner had made sure that the Electoral Commission was aware of who was inside their jails and to ensure that everyone had access to a postal vote.
Australian Electoral Commission documents obtained by the ABC in 2017 found that potentially thousands of prisoners were prevented from voting in recent elections due to a failure to enrol them and register their ballots.
It shouldn't be up to us to follow through the Electoral Commissioner and making sure he does his job properly.
Many prisoners don't vote because of red tape, but there's also the lack of engagement that comes from complex social reasons.
That's partly due to a lack of awareness about their rights or censorship of political materials, which can be changed from the top down. However, I suspect the larger problem is the correlation between criminal activity and dissatisfaction with the political system and process.
Rebecca Broadhead, Newsline.
We're heading to a short break now. Stay with us.
You guys are 2 minutes 20. You're on the left side?
Welcome back to Newsline. Climate change is playing a toll on our environment, and Melbourne's Bayside regions are feeling the effects as some of their favourite beaches are starting to disappear. Kendra Jewell reports.
It's the peaceful sound of lapping waves. But it's hitting a little close to home as these waves seem to be lapping up the shorelines all over Melbourne.
It is noticeably different from my perspective as a swimmer and as someone who loves the beach.
As a result of the ongoing climate issue, rising sea levels and coastal erosion is threatening some of Melbourne's most popular beaches, and locals, including Michael, are certainly feeling the drift.
There's a lot more erosion these days. I've been living in Port Melbourne for 4 years. I've been swimming for at least 3, and it's been disappointing to see the changes.
Councils of affected areas are working hard to combat the erosion issues in order to protect some of Melbourne's most well-known tourist attractions. Known for its picturesque views and iconic bathing boxes, Dendy Street Beach in Brighton is one prime example of a beach hotspot that is under threat from coastal erosion. The Dendy Street shoreline is usually a popular destination for morning walkers. However, as sea levels rise and the sand continues to erode, it is becoming much more difficult for people to walk along this front. And it faces the threat of losing more than just the morning walkers. Not only will the erosion eventually affect the bathing boxes, but will also pose a risk to the beach's precious dune system and important Indigenous vegetation. To slow down the erosion, the Bayside City Council has placed a number of sandbags along the beachfront and are in talks of potentially building an offshore breakwater. However, Head of Monash University's Coastal Research Group, Ruth Reef, says that managing coastal erosion depends on the location, and every solution comes with a consequence to the environment.
There's never one solution. I think we should think about solutions as a salad of options, and different areas would require different options, and each solution we would apply would come with a consequence.
Kendra Jewell, Newsline.
Joining us live in the studio is Jacqueline Stanley with International News.
Hi guys. At a late-night summit in Brussels, European Union diplomats have agreed to impose a ban of 90% of Russian oil imports. It's an attempt to punish President Vladimir Putin for his invasion of Ukraine. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the decision expresses a united message to address speculation of disunity within the EU. On the ground in Ukraine, President Zelensky says 32 media workers have been killed since the invasion began. This new death toll comes after 32-year-old French journalist Frédéric Leclerc-Imhoff was killed while covering an attempted evacuation of Severodonetsk. President Emmanuel Macron has paid tribute on Twitter, reiterating France's unconditional support for journalists reporting on the front line. It is estimated that about 15,000 civilians remain trapped in the city and have gone more than 2 weeks without mobile phone connections. In breaking news, the mayor of Mariupol says that city staff have discovered 25 more mass graves in the southern part of the city. Across to India now. More details have emerged about the death of 28-year-old rapper known as Sidhu Musivala, who was shot in broad daylight in a village in Punjab. Before the attack, Musivala's security detail had been reduced and the officers weren't travelling with the singer when he was killed. Interestingly, he ran as a candidate for the state assembly election earlier this year but lost. The singer also had a police case against him for allegedly promoting violence and gun culture, but fans call him an artist who made sense of chaos. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government will introduce some of the strongest gun control measures by invoking a freeze of buying and selling handguns. Speaking in Ottawa last night, he listed a series of mass shootings in both Canada and the United States to garner support for his legislation. Now, art lovers at the Louvre have had their day spiced up when a man masquerading as an elderly woman hurled a piece of cake at the Mona Lisa. In scenes that would see Da Vinci roll over in his 16th century grave, the man weaved through crowds in a wheelchair, clad in lipstick and a black wig.
So, and then what happened?
And then he stripped his bald head of the wig and began smearing the white creamy icing over the priceless artefact.
He then proceeded to throw rose petals around the room, and the 500-year Mona Lisa has hung there for 225 years and hasn't seen this much action since she was stolen right off the wall in 1911.
And do we know why he defaced the painting?
Well, we can assume that it was motivated by a lack of international action on climate change, because he was heard shouting, "Think of the earth. There are people who are destroying the earth. Think about it. Artists tell you, think of the earth. That's why I did this."
What do you think Leonardo da Vinci would think of this?
Well, he was a pretty big procrastinator, so he'd probably be taken aback by the guy's enthusiasm. And that's it for international news. Now we're going to hear a bit about some pretty questionable cosmetics.
Yes, we are. Thanks, Jacqueline. The unethical practice of shark liver harvesting for the cosmetic industry is increasing the threat of extinction for Australia's deepwater sharks. Alexander Marcucci reports.
The shark population is decreasing due to their livers being harvested.
Sharks are one of the most threatened groups of animals on the entire planet. Anywhere from 65 to 263 million sharks are fished every year. This is a huge burden on our oceans.
Marine biologist and campaigner for the Australian organisation called Humane Society International, Lawrence Quebec works with one of the many organisations that are frustrated with the unethical practice, but not surprised.
The cosmetic industry is no different from any other industry that exploits animals. For another industry to come along and exploit animals in this way is really not surprising. And that's why there's organizations like us that do everything we can to make sure there's sustainable resource use where we can, and ending that practice.
Squalene oil can be found in your favourite moisturisers, sunscreens and makeup brands. There is a strong consumer demand for the product because of the health benefits it provides. But at what cost? The deadly cost of shark extinction.
The Humane Society International is fully committed to the conservation of sharks in Australia and making consumers aware of the ingredients they are purchasing.
I think it's extremely unnecessary to include squalene in beauty products and skincare. I also think it's quite unfair for the word to be used in the ingredients on the labels when a lot of people are not educated on what squalene is. I would definitely be turned off the idea of purchasing a skincare product that had squalene in it.
First and foremost, educate yourself. Read what's on the labels of the products that you purchase. Second is get involved, either through volunteering efforts or signing petitions or following organizations on social media.
Recently, Lawrence was made aware of an alternative oil which he believes is the best way to avoid overexploiting these deep water sharks. Alexandra Marcucci for RMIT Newsline.
Hello, I'm Marian Garay. RMIT University researchers have developed a brand new method of converting carbon dioxide into solid carbon. The new technology will help advance the decarbonization of the cement and steel industries. I spoke to Associate Professor Dr. Torben Denek on his experimental approach of building on the use of liquid metals as a catalyst. Hello, Dr. Torben Denek. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So you're doing this research on transforming carbon into solid material. Could you tell me more about it?
Well, at RMIT, we developed here a new process where we utilize a molten metal catalyst, where we can take carbon dioxide and convert it into solid carbon materials. And the basic idea here is to take CO2 that would normally get emitted into the atmosphere, and instead of emitting it into the atmosphere, we want to turn it back into a solid, so that it doesn't pollute the environment and that we can possibly also use it again for practical uses.
And in the video you have sent me, it says your technology is a new tool to help us closer to net zero. How is it going to help reach net zero?
So our plan is to implement this technology in industrial settings, particularly this really insidious, difficult to decarbonize industries such as cement manufacturing and steel manufacturing. And we are planning to directly take the CO2 from the smokestack, essentially, and run it through our process and then turn the CO2 into solid carbon materials and then use them again. So really the goal here is to use it with these difficult to decarbonize heavy industries.
Awesome. And so the Labour government is committing to net zero emissions by 2050. They are supporting industrial and agricultural sectors by investing in $3 billion in green metals. Is your research something that could be or is part of the investment?
Well, we are hoping to be well, getting some support, of course, and we are definitely going to look into that. At the moment, we're working close with Australian industry. So we're working with an Australian cement manufacturer here in Melbourne that is helping us to develop this process further. And we are looking at different options in federal and state funding that might help us to get there in the end.
Awesome. And so based on that, what do we have to do to reach net zero?
Well, I think the number one option really is to avoid emissions to begin with. So essentially move towards renewable electricity and energy sources as much as we can, and then develop these technologies like ours to essentially get rid of the last little bit of emissions from the heavy industry sector. In the end, as society, we can do our bit by reducing emissions and moving towards renewables, but we still want to utilize products like cement and steel. We will always need them, so we have to find a solution for that as well. And we're working towards that.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And we're going to take a short break now, so stick around.
Good to go, everybody. Well done.
Awesome, thank you.
Awesome, it's all a bit vague when you
Welcome back to Newsline. Last Saturday's federal election saw a record number of votes for minor parties and independents, with a hung parliament still a very real possibility. With such low first preference voting for the two major parties, can we expect to see support for the minor parties and independents continue to rise? Reporter Tom Monaghan has more.
Saturday's federal election has seen a massive shift with independents and minor parties now controlling at least 15 seats in the next parliament. But is this a sign of things to come?
The swing away from major parties has been a long time coming. It's got a background in the Senate, of course, and now we're seeing a quite substantial swing against the major parties in the House of Representatives too.
This year's election saw a 5.8% swing to the minor parties and independents, with 16 seats at least being won by these candidates. The shift saw traditional Liberal and Labor-held seats swing, in some, for the first time ever, away from traditional parties and towards the minor parties and independents. Professor John Warhurst believes this swing will force the two major parties to not take their seats for granted and will make them listen to the needs of their constituents.
That the community as a whole is handing the major party government as a privilege, but they're saying, listen to the independents, listen to the Greens, listen to others, and have the humility to govern in that collaborative fashion.
Greens candidate for Dixon, Vinnie Batten, believes this shift will allow Parliament to properly represent all members of society.
When we see more and more hung parliaments, all we're seeing is our system being used to represent and portray what a lot of other really progressive, stable systems around the world look like.
It is clear that there has been a massive shift in voters' sentiment at this year's election, with a way for independents and minority parties. But the question still remains, is this an election that is a sign of things to come and an end to our traditional two-party system, or will this remain as an outlier in history? I'm Tom Monahan for Newsline.
Please be advised that the following segment contains the names of deceased people. We're now going to cross live to Matilda.
Matilda, what is happening today at Melbourne's Shrine of Remembrance?
The Victorian Aboriginal Remembrance Service took place here today at 11 a.m. It commemorated the lives of so many First Nations people who gave themselves and their heroism to the wars. But unfortunately, they weren't allowed to enlist until the Second World War. So much of their heroism has been disregarded for far too long, and that's what this morning's memorial was all about.
How long has this service been happening?
This year marks 16 years of Aboriginal services, the first one being here in Victoria, after the late Auntie Dot, who's an Aboriginal elder, sought to make some change about the way things were being run. And she wanted to remember her father, who fought so bravely in the war, but was unrecognised for it.
What were the highlights of the morning service?
Despite this morning's cold weather, the rain did hold off for us, which meant that we could have a smoke service and listen to the speakers, one of who was Auntie Dot's nephew, who was named after her father, being one of the propelling influences to 16 years of Aboriginal Remembrance services. And last year, the service was online, so it was just absolutely fantastic to be here in person today.
Thank you, Matilda. We'll be back shortly.
Minutes.
a move that has been celebrated by animal rights groups, horse-drawn carriages have been banned from Melbourne CBD. Matt Hurd reports.
Starting in June, the horse-drawn carriages will no longer be able to operate within the boundaries of Melbourne CBD. Victoria's Transport Minister Ben Carroll announced the ban early this month, saying the move was driven by safety. Ray Whittaker has been operating the carriages in Melbourne for 37 years and is one of just 2 operators left in the city.
That was announced 2 weeks ago on TV, newspaper and everything like that, and we weren't even informed.
The ban comes as the industry attempts to recover and bounce back from 2 years of COVID lockdowns and lost work.
We're suffering pretty bad at the moment. I'll have to sell some, to get rid of some of the horses. I have to get rid of some of these.
The carriages have been a feature of Melbourne CBD for decades. However, their presence has been marred by controversy. Animal rights groups have been campaigning to ban the carriages for nearly 10 years.
Yeah, just really glad that the authorities finally came together and did what we've been asking them to do for so long. The issues really are human and horse safety issues and the horse welfare and the fact that they don't have the ability to freely express themselves and they're tied up to a post most of the day when they are in the city.
You just got to look at our horses, you can see they're not being neglected in any shape or form. They just don't understand what we're about. You know what I mean? They think it's just cruel, 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 no matter what you say.
The RSPCA says the ban is a win for animal welfare, stating RSPCA inspectors attended 48 cruelty reports concerning carriage horses over the past 5 years.
From the 13th of June, the horse-drawn carriages will be banished from the CBD and limited to working on the city's outskirts.
Well, we don't know what we're going to do come the 13th of June. I think our days are numbered.
Matt Hurd, RMIT, Melbourne.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Roundup. I'm Pete Whelan.
And I'm Amy Upton-Stokes.
Here on the Roundup, we'll be covering some of the biggest stories across tech, arts and more.
But first, let's take a look at today's headlines around the globe.
CNN reports that Hurricane Agatha has made landfall in Mexico, just west of Puerto Rico. The hurricane is a Category 2 storm with winds of 105 miles per hour. Agatha is predicted to produce dangerous storm surge, strong winds and flooding rains as it makes its way inland over the next 24 hours.
Al Jazeera is reporting on Greece's request to the European Union for financial support to triple the length of the wall along its border with Turkey. The funding would pay for the steel wall to be extended from 40 to 120 kilometres as tensions worsen between the two countries. Construction is due to start later this year.
The BBC is reporting that the head of the Methodist Church in Nigeria, Samuel Kamu, has been released after being abducted on Sunday. Kanu was travelling with 2 other priests in the Nigerian state of Abia when all 3 were kidnapped.
The Washington Post reports India's Supreme Court now defines prostitution as a profession, affirming the rights of sex workers and ordering an end to police violence. However, sex workers still fear backlash from police.
The ABC reports archaeologists in Egypt have found hundreds of ancient Egyptian coffins and bronze statues of deities near the capital Cairo. The 400 objects discovered date about 500 BC.
The Irish Mirror is covering a story on air passengers in Ireland who are suffering lengthy delays at Dublin Airport. Passengers have been advised to arrive at least 3 hours before flying due to staff shortages with Ireland's police force. Social media is flooded with accounts of passengers frustrated with long lines and extended wait times.
And that's it for today's front page world news. Let's turn to the latest news in tech, the arts and international politics.
We'll start with the tech sector.
An Australian billionaire is using his influence to clean up Australia's biggest energy polluter. Jack, tell us more about this intriguing tech story.
Yes, Pete. Australian billionaire Michael Cannon-Brookes has seemingly cleaned up Australia's biggest energy polluter. AGL Energy, an Australian-listed public company, acts as the country's largest electricity generator, and it leads the nation in carbon emissions. It also contributes to around 8% of Australia's carbon footprint, I should say. The major Australian energy provider of electricity and gas announced a decision to abandon plans that would keep coal burning for another 20 years. AGL provides around a third of Victoria's power through gas and coal power stations, and it also contributes to the biggest greenhouse gas emissions in Australia. Chief Executive Graham Hunt and Chairman Peter Botten have both announced their resignation from the company just recently.
As Australia's leading energy contributor, AGL sound like a powerful company. What gives Michael Cannon-Brookes such influence over AGL?
Well, as Australian software company Atlassian's co-founder and as AGL's largest shareholder, Cannon-Brookes has played a massive part in directing AGL away from producing coal-fired power. Cannon-Brookes' company also develops software for developers, project managers, and other various development teams.
Michael Cannon-Brookes seems very passionate about moving Australia towards renewable energy. How does this factor into the rumours of a takeover bid for AGL by him?
Well, Amy, Cannon-Brookes has actually rejected the possibility of a takeover of the AGL company by himself. He says he wants to rebuild the company by dumping coal in order to push down power prices. As AGL's largest shareholder, Cannon-Brookes said the announcement is a significant step forward and a huge day for Australia in a tweet that he was posted yesterday.
Next in tech, we're taking another look at Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, which is still making news. Yesterday, we heard about the new iOS, but today we're hearing about what's happening on the mobile side of things. Jack, tell us about the tech.
Yes, Amy, the Apple Worldwide Developer Conference is just days away, occurring from 6th to the 10th of June. However, some of Apple's new planned technology has been leaked, with plans for major camera upgrades coming out prior to the conference. Plans to feature new kinds of telephoto lenses have been introduced to this year's anticipated iPhone 14, making them capable of delivering improved zoom capabilities. Apple is to source the new high-end camera technology from LG Innotek, based in South Korea, and from Sharp, based in Japan.
And what other kind of technology can we expect from the new iPhone? What kind of issues do you think consumers may have to deal with upon the release of the new technology?
Well, the plans also include the new selfie camera upgrades, which will allow for new improved features such as autofocus capability. It features significant image quality improvement, although reduces the amount of the frame that can be in focus at any one time. Despite the many positives, there are some issues that consumers can expect with the new rollout of the iPhones. Autofocus is more expensive and difficult to make, and it is also harder to capture photos in some certain circumstances. This means that the unit price is expected to rise 3 times as much compared to previous iPhone models. Consumers can expect to see the new iPhone 14 on shelves on September of this year.
Thanks, Jack. Now, let's take a look at what's happening in the arts. This year, First Nation artists have their art showcase across 6 Melbourne trams as of last week. Arts reporter Rochelle Putnikovic has more.
In a collaboration between the Victorian Government and Rising Festival, Melbourne's annual Art Tram initiative see their 2022 theme titled Unapologetically Black. First Nation artists, past and present, will have their art displayed on 6 of our trams for a 12-month duration. On the 24th of May in East Melbourne, the first art tram was revealed at the first stop from tram routes 48 and 75.
Melbourne's iconic trams are known to have displayed art in the past as well. This new round of works is called Unapologetically Black. Which First Nation artists can we see have their work displayed?
Featured is a reimagining of Yorta Yorta activist and artist, the late Lynn Onus's tram artwork, which debuted in 1991. Under the guidance of Tiraki Onus, the artist's son, the installation displays black and white cockatoos and First Nation cultural markings referencing country. Lynn Onus sadly passed away in 1996.
So that's Lynn Onus. We'll be seeing a lot of their work on at least one of the trams in the project, but there are 5 other trams. Which First Nation artists will we be admiring on some of those?
The 2022 program, curated by visual artist Jara Carolina Steele on Bunurong country, will see First Nation artists past and present, including Louise Moore, Patricia McKean, Dr. Paula Bella, Tegan Murdoch and Darcy McConnell.
And now to another public art project here in Melbourne. This one is called Wild About Babies. It features around 20 sculptures of endangered animals displayed along the banks of the Yarra River. What can we look forward to here, Rochelle?
In an aim to raise awareness of endangered species, artist duo Gillian Mark collaborated with charity partner Worldwide Fund for Nature Australia, also known as WWF Australia. The most important public sculpture installation on Earth for 2022, according to Gillian Mark, is titled Wild About Babies, debuted on 20th of May along Yarra's Edge and will run until May 2023.
WWF are quite a large charity organisation in support of wilderness preservation and the reduction of human impact on the environment. Can we expect a wide range of animals displayed?
Sure. Each approximately 1 metre tall, the display will include a baby giant panda, baby chimpanzee, baby hippo and baby African elephant. It will also be an interactive display where visitors can scan each of the QR codes attached and bring up information about each creature.
Thank you, Rochelle. Now let's take a look back at some of the bigger international politics stories from today. In Colombia, the two major candidates for the upcoming federal election are heading into the final round. There's populist businessman Rodolfo Hernandez making a surprising entry as the Conservative candidate. He's running against Gustavo Petro, a former rebel who now serves in the Colombian Senate. Reporter James Dowling is here to tell us more.
Overtaking the expected Conservative candidate, Federico Gutierrez, Hernandez is running on promises of anti-corruption policy. However, his combative rhetoric has earned him comparison to former American President Donald Trump, and his presidential campaign has been built on appealing to a demographic that have been exhausted with traditional politics, entering the election with little experience. Hernandez has previously confessed to holding sympathies for the rhetoric of Adolf Hitler and promised to declare a state of emergency upon election, raising fears of autocratic ambitions in the candidate.
This is an unexpected result. Few predicted Petro to compete against Hernandez rather than the more mainstream candidates. Where does Colombia now sit in the broader context of modern elections in Latin America?
Yeah, well, we're seeing huge swings at the moment between very progressive parties like that in Chile and some of the more traditional conservative parties that are running on like strongman personality politics, like what you have with Bolsonaro in Brazil. And it's very hard to tell what's winning out in the region. But I think in terms of this Colombian election, corruption has always been a pretty easy policy to base an election around. So it's really riding on how much he can project his personality and whether or not the people will respond to that.
And next up, two outspoken Cuban artists are on trial in Havana. Rapper Michael Castillo appeared in court today. He appeared alongside the leader of the San Isidro protest movement, Luis Manuel Otero Alcantara. They are on trial for civil dissidents after a year in captivity. James, what's the story here?
Castillo and Alcantara are both members of the San Isidro movement, known as MSI, which is an artist collective focused on political activism, helping spearhead the growing protest against Cuban authoritarianism that has raged across the last 2 years. Castillo faces an unexpected 10-year incarceration for assault, while Alcantara faces 7 for public disorder and contempt. This is part of a greater trend of civil and artistic oppression as Cuba enters its 2nd year out of the Castro dynasty.
This trial comes during a tumultuous time for the Cuban administration, with government adjusting to new leadership after Raul Castro's decade-long reign. How are these trials likely to impact the continuing civil protest in Cuba?
Well, I think what we're seeing at the moment is something quite similar to the Arab Spring, where it's arguably the first time for the country that social media can be really used to move past a lot of the long-held censorship in the region, which makes it very unprecedented, and that's been like a huge tool for both of these artists. So it's hard to see this trial getting anything other than a negative response among the people of Cuba. I think it could definitely be effective in showing other artists what this kind of relatively small act of dissidence can lead to on a wider scale, but I would be quite surprised if this was the last trial of this kind we saw.
Thanks, James. That's our roundup for today.
Thanks to our other reporters, Jack O'Shea Ayres on tech and Rochelle Putnovic on arts.
For the roundup, I'm Pete Whelan.
And I'm Amy Upton-Stokes. We're going to take a short break now, then we'll be back soon. See you then.
now we are going to cross to Liam McNally, who is at the Fitzy Bowl in Edinburgh Gardens. Hi Liam, so tell us, how's the Edinburgh Gardens skate park upgrade going?
Yeah, it's looking real good. The builders shut down for the day during the rain this morning, but yeah, it's a project that's been in the works for a few years. They started building last week and they should be done in August. It's done by a company called Grind Projects. It's a skater-owned company. They've been building skate parks for 10 years, so hopefully it's going to turn out real good. I spoke to local skateboarder James Van Beek, who had this to say about it as well.
It's going to be good. Like, there's so many kids that come down. It's obviously hard to skate the bowl because everyone's trying to go hard in the bowl, so they don't get that time, which we want to give them, but like a lot of kids get scared, even other people get scared. But we have this extension, it's going to open up so much opportunity, and there's so many young families that live around here, so it makes sense. It's going to be sick, and like for progression, like all I can skate is bowl, so it'll be nice to skate something else, which is going to be good. More inner city kind of cool little park that isn't something in the city or further out in the suburbs.
Has there been a big demand for this upgrade?
Yeah, totally. The skate park's been here since 1991, and it's like a bit of a Melbourne staple for the skateboarding community. And it's just this little bowl here. It's been here for 30 years, and so people have been crying out for it to get extended for a while. And the council's been kind of liaising with the community for about 3 years now, going back and forth, trying to figure out how to do it, and now it's finally underway.
Great. And so do you think the introduction of skateboarding at the Tokyo Olympics has also seen this kind of increase in the sport?
Yeah, totally. Events like that just make it kind of more mainstream, I think. And that just gets more people, like especially younger people, like families, see it as more of a legitimate thing to get people involved with. And yeah, so that means more skate parks and things for people to use. That's all cool.
And what are the skating conditions right there like now?
Right now, it's pretty cold. It was obviously raining earlier today, which shut down the construction. The sun came through for a bit, so there's a few people hanging out here now, but yeah, still quite chilly.
Thank you, Liam. I hope you get out of the cold soon. The Rocky Road Festival has taken over chocolatiers in the Great Ocean Road, Yarra Valley and Mornington Peninsula. For the month of May, 31 flavours of one of Australia's favourite desserts is up for grabs. Rebecca Chin reports.
Marshmallows, coconut, lollies and nuts mixed with melted chocolate.
Easily adaptable to each individual, Rocky Road has tickled the taste buds of many for centuries. It's the easy no-bake dessert recipe that Australians have loved since 1853, when businessmen first came up with a way to sell confectionery that had been spoiled from their trip from Europe to Australia.
And where else to find the experts of the dessert than on Victoria's rockiest road, the Great Ocean Road. For the month of May, people from all over Victoria have delighted in the Rocky Road Festival in the lead up to Rocky Road Day on the 2nd of June. Boasting 31 flavours for the 31 days of May, the Great Ocean Road, Yarra Valley and Mornington Peninsula chocolateries have mastered the art of mixing local ingredients with rich Belgian chocolate. Nutella, Biscoff, strawberry cheesecake and even a Mexican fiesta are just some of the flavours up for grabs. Head chocolatier Alan Grandjean says it's great to see so many new and local faces now that people can experience these flavours in person.
So it's all about just different flavors of Rocky Road with homemade marshmallows, homemade products mixed into our beautiful Belgian couverture chocolates. And yeah, it's all about fun.
Australia has a rich history in the chocolate industry, with companies like Cadbury creating internationally recognised treats since 1922. Everyone has a favourite.
My favourite chocolate is Turkish Delight.
My favourite chocolate is caramel.
My favourite chocolate is Kit Kat.
Rocky Road is only one example of the famous flavours to come out of the Australian chocolate industry, and the Great Ocean Road Chocolatery is continuing to make the industry proud. This is Rebecca Chin, RMIT Newsline.
And now it's time to take a look at sports news with reporter Ethan Dean.
Thanks, Ada. Starting with soccer, European football's governing body, UEFA, will be launching an inquiry into chaotic scenes outside the Stade de France on Saturday's Champions League final. Liverpool supporters were tear-gassed after waiting in massive queues for their match against Real Madrid. The French government has launched a separate inquiry into the event, which delayed the opening of the match by 36 minutes. UEFA initially blamed the delay on fans arriving late to the stadium before releasing a statement shortly after saying fake tickets were the cause. Closer to home, Socceroos star playmaker Tom Rogic has withdrawn from the Australian squad ahead of critical qualifying match for this year's World Cup. The Socceroos are set to face off against the United Arab Emirates Wednesday in a sudden death playoff. If they can cinch the win without Rogic, they'll face Peru on June 14th for their chance to head to Qatar in November. In the AFL, Western Bulldogs superstar Bailey Smith has been cleared to return after missing last week's 101-point triumph over the West Coast Eagles. The midfielder was out with a severe flu, but says he feels right as rain ahead of this Friday's blockbuster clash with Geelong at Marvel Stadium. Finally, Australia's men's cricket team has revealed a packed schedule following 2 years of COVID postponements. The team is set for a massive 27 fixtures over the summer, not including potential finals matches for the 2020 World Cup. Matchups include a highly anticipated Test series against visiting South Africa and West Indies, and the first top-end tour since 2008. It's the busiest summer the team has had, easily breaking their previous record of 24 appearances in the 2014 season. That's it for sports. Back to you, Ada and Amy.
The International Day Against LGBTIQA+ discrimination occurred earlier this month, marking the anniversary of the World Health Organization delisting homosexuality as a mental health disorder. The day is celebrated with events that raise awareness of LGBTIQA+ rights. Our reporter Lillian Bernhardt attended one of these events at the Thornbury Bowl Club and has the story.
On the 22nd of May, Darebin families gathered in celebration of IDAHOBIT at a live music event hosted by Rainbow Village, a project aiming to reduce social isolation in the LGBTQIA+ community of Darebin.
With recent harmful rhetoric surrounding religious discrimination bills and trans people, event organiser Ruby Mountford says that celebrating IDAHOBIT is as important as ever.
We still live in societies that are struggling to really recognise, let alone celebrate, the diversity of human experience. And I think IDAHOBIT is a day where it is nice to remind people why we are the way we are, what our communities have gone through, what we've fought for, what we've achieved, what we still need to do. And for allies to have an opportunity to make their voices heard too and to kind of really show up.
Among the lineup was Riot Baby, a punk band for kids. I spoke to band member John Cheong Holdaway about his inspirations for playing at the event.
Our sort of niche for music is under 10s, and that's this is a group of people who really, I think, need different kinds of messages, and we need people talking about inclusion the whole way. It shouldn't be something I first heard about. People talking about this when I was 18 at uni, and I feel like if we can create a kind of society where people are telling these messages through the whole kinds of life, then we'll have a more tolerant society when people are 18.
Rainbow Village prioritised family-friendly events, creating community for kids and parents who identify as queer.
I think so these events show us that these families exist and that they can network and they can share advice, that they're not like all in little isolated pockets trying to find ways to get by. But it also helps kids to see that there's nothing wrong with them, and it helps us to see that there's a bright future.
Lillian Bernhardt, Newsline.
Now to the weather from Melbourne and around the country with reporter Jacqueline Stanley.
Thanks, Ada. While it's really heating up in our Swanston Street studio, Melbourne's cold weather will continue throughout the week. Today's top of 11 degrees will not get much warmer, with a top of 12 degrees tomorrow to mark the start of winter. Thursday will bring a top of 13, and Friday on the weekend, if you're going to the footy to see the D's beat the Swans, rug up because it's going to be rainy with tops of 14 and 13 degrees. Across the nation now, tomorrow's forecast predicts a windy 15 degrees in Sydney, a sunny 19 in Brisbane, Adelaide with a top of 15, Hobart with showers and 12 degrees. Albanese's new cabinet will enjoy a crisp top of 8 in Canberra, and lucky Western Australians will see the gauge climb to 20 degrees in Perth. As usual, we can all dream of the Darwin climate, with the Territory's capital reaching a sultry 32 degrees. Back in Melbourne, the Bureau has issued a severe weather warning for damaging winds across the central region. A vigorous southwesterly will strengthen overnight as cold fronts cross Bass Strait. So be careful tonight on your commute home and watch out for gusty winds and possible hail. That's all for Newsline Weather. I'm Jacqueline Stanley. Back to you, Ada and Amy.
That concludes Newsline for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amy Ross.
And I'm Ada Hall. Have a good night, Melbourne.